Okay, so, hi, what is your name?
Hi, my name is Kayt.
Can you explain what you do?
So I am the manager of a group home that cares for adults with intellectual and mental disabilities that make it impossible for them to live on their own.
Okay. Do you have any personal investment in, or any personal experience with mental illness?
I do. I suffer from PTSD and major depressive disorder. And so do many people in my family, something that I'm very familiar with. Yeah.
Okay. What are the most pressing needs of the community of people who live with mental illness?
I would definitely say knowledge, and just community knowledge, both within and without of the community as a whole, an understanding of the fact that there are so many different mental illnesses and there are a lot of hot buzzwords that tend to trigger fear within people that really shouldn't. My biggest example, I guess, would be schizophrenia as a buzzword, where you say schizophrenia and all of a sudden it is this huge, dangerous thing, or bipolar disorder, where is this huge, dangerous, this thing, and people don't go any deeper than that. But these disorders are not these people. Just because I have depression doesn't mean that I am in my bed all day, every day. And even people who can't, lead quote unquote normal lives, because of these different abilities or their, struggles, doesn't mean that there's some dangerous person that needs to be hidden away in some sort of hospital-like 50s-esque, asylum type deal. That there are people out there with schizophrenia who are fully functioning, capable humans. There are people out there with schizophrenia who live in group homes, who go out in the community, who work in the community, who maybe just need a little bit of extra help. And so I would say the biggest need would be just that knowledge and understanding that these are people. They have their own needs, wants, wishes, desires, and they want to live in, they and we would want to live a normal life just like everybody else. It just takes some extra help sometimes.
Who would you say are the stakeholders, the figures of authority, or the leaders of this community?
Honestly, I don't know that there is one person that I could name, because I get emails from the Utah, the state of Utah, the system that we have, just every week about changes in leadership and things like that. It's a thing.
Yeah.
That I am learning to kind of just go through on my email. But I can definitely say that everybody is affected by it, in leadership, in public health leadership, in the different programs that Utah has set up, and even within the different nonprofit programs. Just kind of, most of them are parents and loved ones of people who have these abilities, disabilities, who are affected by it.
Okay. Who would you say might have the most vested interest in the issues of this community?
Honestly, those of us who have been through it, who have been either inpatient or outpatient, or have worked very closely with people who can't advocate for themselves. And the reason I say that is because you can't like personally for my job, I don't live with, but I work with people every single day who cannot advocate for themselves. And I see a lot of like my coworkers, colleagues who have more of a vested interest in what happens, because you can't do what I do and not care. You won't survive. You don't make the connections that are necessary, at least in my case. And because we see the daily impact of it. And so for those who can't, it's not even a surrogate type of, we're vested for them. It's, we see the impact so fully that it affects us. And so for those of us who can advocate for ourselves, it's one of those, like, of course we have the most vested interest, because this is my life, this is my battle, this is my struggle. And so of course it's something that we have a fully vested interest in, but I don't think those who have these challenges are the only ones that have the most vested interest, if that makes sense.
Who would you say might have the most authority, like who can influence the change or make the changes or control how the system operates?
Honestly, that's a really hard question, because leadership...
You don't have to have the right answer.
Yeah. So leadership changes so much in companies like mine because people get very burnt out. Leadership changes in any sort of public health organization, things like that, because people get so burnt out. And so I think the change starts from the bottom, from people who work daily, and just kind of those who have power to make policy changes, listening to the people who work daily. Like I said, giving specific names is not my strong suit. But I would say the people who have the most power to make those changes are people who work with people who have severe mental illness and disability.
Who would you say has the least authority in that situation?
The people who live with it. I can't tell you how many times I've gone into a hospital and, or even to advocate for my child, and to friends or to family or anything like that, and get so blown off because, well, you have depression or you have anxiety, you have PTSD, so this is just an overreaction of, when this is actually something that, like, just yesterday has come up in my life where, well, this is just an overreaction. And it's like, no, and so that kind of carries over into people aren't necessarily believed. Like, you're not believed when you have these illnesses because it's, because you struggle. And so I really feel like the people who live with these changes, and especially those severely affected by mental illness, have the least amount of power to impact the changes.
So how do internal and external power relations affect the community?
I feel like that goes back to my first answer. And I use schizophrenia and bipolar a lot as examples for this, mostly because it's something that I've previously worked with. And internally, anybody who has worked around those with severe mental or intellectual disabilities and illnesses, we all kind of know. You hear it and you're like, okay, there are varying degrees. This is a whole bunch of different shades of gray. And or whatever color you particularly want to deal with. I personally like to think of blues, but whatever. This is it goes from like a light blue to like the darkest navy that almost looks black. And there's every shade and color in between with every different symptom. But outside of the community, like outside of anyone who's either worked with it or experienced it, you say schizophrenia and they're like, what? You mean that like that one TV show I saw where like the person was talking to themselves and like they had like tinfoil on their head, and I'm like, I don't know what.
I don't know that person.
Yeah. Or like, you mean like bipolar, like that mother who neglects their child because they're off gambling or drinking or something. And I'm like, no, I know plenty of people who live with bipolar and who have families and kids. Like, but like, and so I feel like there tends to be a divide because those of us who know, like, don't want to talk to the people who don't because we don't want to deal with it. So I'm not sure if I fully answered your question, but I think it did. So maybe.
That is, yes, I feel like that fully answers the question.
Great.